Thank you very much, Chairman Rockefeller and members of the committee. I'm here on behalf of the 850,000 members of the Steelworkers Union, but also on behalf of the 12.5 million members of the AFL-CIO. And we want to tell you that American manufacturing is currently in dire circumstances, and we believe its future is in jeopardy, as is the economic and national security of the United States at risk. America's economic recovery remains fragile, as you pointed out earlier. Unemployment, underemployment, wage stagnation, foreclosures, they all paint a grim picture of a people and an economy that's still in terrible, terrible straits and is struggling to recover. There's too many, and there have been too many shuttered factories. 54,000 of those factories closed during the first 8 years of this decade. Close to 3,000 more factories closed as a result of the Wall Street economic meltdown. Now less than 10% of America's GDP comes from manufacturing, where just 20-something years ago, close to 23% of America's GDP came from manufacturing. And despite, as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, the small uptick in manufacturing employment and production that occurs against the backdrop of a long-term decline and devastation, let me say to you and the members of the committee that real wealth is not created by creating collateral debt offerings and phony financial bubbles. Real wealth is created when we take raw material, ingenuity, engineering, energy, and people's creativity and add value to that, and that's what manufacturing does. The details of the backdrop are outlined in the AFL-CIO's Industrial Council report, Manufacturing Insecurity, America's Manufacturing Crisis, and the Erosion of the U.S. Defense Industrial Base, and the report has been submitted as support for this testimony. My written testimony makes 4 key points, Mr. Chairman. The nation's technical, innovative, and industrial capacities are essential to our economic and national security, as is the rebuilding of our nation's infrastructure. The health of our manufacturing base and our defense industrial base are inextricably linked, and they are both currently in critical condition. Our trade, tax, and investment procurement policies, the globalization of production, and the failure to have a national manufacturing strategy help create this situation. Probably no one expects me to create or to quote one of America's great manufacturers, one of America's great capitalist families. But Bill Ford, the chairman of Ford Motor Company, said on more than one occasion, "Not having a plan is not a plan." And I'm happy to quote him, and I agree with him. It doesn't have to be this way. I think that we must act now. The Senate, the House of Representatives, and the administration need to act now with a strategic plan and employment-linked policies, investments, and incentives to restart revitalizing America's industrial base. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I could spend my time today on an ongoing basis describing problem after problem after problem, but I believe all of you understand it. So let me further identify what I think needs to be done to address it. Before I do this, I want to quote specific policy approaches. Let me make 2 overriding points. I believe that there is a fundamental and growing gap between the interests of multinational companies and Wall Street and the national interest. Our companies in the financial sector are simply interested in most of the time, for most of them, in short-term profits, wherever and however they may be achieved. Their interests are not naturally in the creation of economic growth and opportunity here at home, and we have to recognize that and deal with it. Americans are interested in where we stand in the world and where their kids' opportunities for good jobs will come from. They know that our leadership on human rights, democracy, freedom, and internationally recognized workers' rights depends on our economic and military strength. They aren't interested in being number 2 or number 3, and we shouldn't accept decline as being inevitable, although we are number 1 in accumulated trade deficits. For those that are the die-hard free traders, let me give you 2 quick facts. Since NAFTA, America has accumulated a $7 trillion ongoing trade deficit year over year over year. Since the passage of PNTR with China, we've accumulated a $1.7 trillion ongoing trade deficit with China. That is nothing more than a wealth transfer from America to China. So it's important that we get our trade house in order and enforce our laws. Aggressively enforce our trade laws. We need to address China's trade violations and establish our own strategic priorities and policies. We should view success not as the number of trade agreements we can pass or that are signed, by the results they achieve in creating jobs. Our trade agreements should be designed to lower our massive trade deficit, not to add to it. We also need to empower workers to share in the fruits of their labor, enable them to enter the middle class with respect and compensation for their efforts. We need to invest in infrastructure, and Mr. Chairman, I want to compliment you for your advancement of an infrastructure bill. The nation can no longer live on a legacy that we need, and we need the jobs now. We need to start investing trillions of dollars over time in the 21st century infrastructure, from roads to rail, from clean technology, and to the rest of our infrastructure. Let me give you a fact that you may already know. More than 50% of the schools in the United States are more than 60 years old. If we care about our kids, one of the things we could do is start helping our cities and municipalities to modernize our schools. Buy American laws ensure that we actually make the things we are building and installing. An improved America is the legacy we should leave our children and grandchildren, not a decrepit and falling infrastructure. Taxes that support domestic manufacturing. We should eliminate tax incentives and loopholes that encourage financial speculation rather than investment, outsourcing and offshoring production. And we should enact tax incentives for companies that produce domestically. Innovation for American manufacturing. We must protect our nation's innovative leadership. Doing so requires that we maintain strong intellectual property protections here and abroad. We must ensure that increased R&D investment results in American jobs in American workplaces. We need to train and educate America's workers. Revitalizing manufacturers requires workers equipped to meet the skills and the needs of this century and the next. Congress must increase access to training funds for people unemployed, as well as those seeking to enhance their skills. Ultimately, a high-skills workforce must be one whose rights on the job and ability to speak are protected and thus made real through strong labor laws and strong unions. And we should make sure that we revitalize and strengthen TAA for those workers that have unfortunately lost their jobs through bad trade deals through no fault of their own. Our nation's future success, the reclamation of the American dream, depends on the revitalizing of our manufacturing sector. And the Steelworkers Union and the AFL-CIO stand ready to work with Congress in the interest of the future. And let me make one other point, Mr. Chairman. There are those that would want to try to blame the labor movement, as I heard at the start of this, and let me put something on the record. Consider Germany, which has high rates of unionization, an hourly compensation in manufacturing that averages $48 per hour. But Germany has bigger percentage of its GDP in manufacturing than we ever had in our lifetime. Germany has a world lead in exports. It has a balanced trade agenda with China. So that, let me make it clear, of the more than 5.5 million jobs that were lost during the first 8 years of this decade, those jobs were lost in every sector of the economy, in every region of the country, including the South, including Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, in the East, in the West, and the North, in almost every sector. But one of the most important facts is more jobs were lost in non-union facilities than union facilities. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gerard, President Gerard, very much.